The government of Belgium ran the slave colony for another 40 years. The CIA assassinated your first popular leader, Mr. Lumumba, and then installed another dictatorship for the next 30 years. And then Glencore and others now suck out your cobalt without giving you tax income. We don't reflect on that. We say, what's wrong with you? Why don't you govern properly?
So let's talk about DR Congo and all their troubles. I think the situation there is getting worse and worse every single day, and no one is able to render a possible solution to the problem. And this infighting in the country has been ongoing for decades now. It has just been passed down from one leader to the other, and none of the leaders has ever had a solution to the problem. But before we get to that, before I give you my own take on DR Congo and all the troubles they are facing, I want us to watch this video that will give us some insight as to the very beginning of this whole problem in DR Congo. So let's watch this video.
We heard from the minister of DRC. What's wrong with your country? Well, we don't even start by saying the King of Belgium created a slave colony for 30 years. The government of Belgium ran the slave colony for another 40 years. The CIA assassinated your first popular leader, Mr. Lumumba, and then installed another dictatorship for the next 30 years. And then Glencore and others now suck out your cobalt without giving you tax income. We don't reflect on that. We say, what's wrong with you? Why don't you govern properly? And so we have a system, but we need a different system. We cannot turn this over to the private sector. We already did about 100 years ago. Not only to the private sector with the U.S. military behind it, with the defense of these property rights in the minister of Honduras's country, where United Fruit ran the country for a long time. And their attorney was the foreign minister of the United States, Secretary Dulles, and his brother was the head of the CIA and overthrew the next door neighbor, Mr. Arbenz, to make sure that United Fruit could have its property. So we have a system, but we need a different system. It's interesting, we heard from the minister of DRC, what's wrong with your country? Well, we don't even start by saying the King of Belgium created a slave colony for 30 years. The government of Belgium ran the slave colony for another 40 years. The CIA assassinated your first popular leader, Mr. Lumumba, and then installed another dictatorship for the next 30 years. And then Glencore and others now suck out your cobalt without giving you tax income. We don't reflect on that. We say, what's wrong with you? Why don't you govern properly? And so we have a system, but we need a different system. We cannot turn this over to the private sector. We already did about 100 years ago. Not only to the private sector with the U.S. military behind it, with the defense of these property rights in the minister of Honduras's country, where United Fruit ran the country for a long time.
It's so funny to see Westerners calling themselves outright. I think it was the Prime Minister of Italy, I think Giorgio Meloni, who also called out the French for what they've done in the Sahel and mostly French-speaking West African and Central African countries. You know, it's fun to see them call out themselves, right? Because more too often, you won't see them call out themselves. You will see them only support each other and they favor each other. But sometimes you see them call call out each other for the for the horrible things they have done in the African continent. I personally think that the Westerners never came to Africa because they love the continent nor its people. And even to date, they do not. They do not love the Africans nor its people. Because if they did, if they really love Africans, they won't see them struggling to cross over in the Atlantic Ocean and then not do anything. They won't look at them as refugees and then just try their best to send them back to Africa. They won't encourage Libya and Tunisia to block routes that the migrant people are using to cross over to Europe. So they don't love the Africans. No, 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 no. They are in Africa for what they can get from Africa, from the resources they can get from Africa, from the mining they can get from Africa, from every single thing they can get from Africa, and how they can use Africans as puppet. That's just the only reason they are in Africa. That has always been the reason they had ever had any interest in Africa. Never had it been for the people of Africa. Never, ever. Never, ever. Even the so-called democracy that they brought to Africa wasn't for Africans themselves. No, wasn't for the people. No, 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 no. It was just so we couldn't fall under the influence of the communists or the Soviet, the USSR. They brought democracy so that we can always be under their own control rather than falling under the influence of the USSR or China. That was the only reason. And even the so-called democracy is not even fully implemented. Most African leaders just do what they want to do. Let me just pause for a second here. Let me just say this, okay? Like I have said before, right? Africans are partly responsible for the way the continent is. That is true. The Congolese fighting each other are partly responsible for whatever they are doing. That is true. That is true. They are partly responsible for it. The fact that they let the Westerners influence their actions and decisions make them partly responsible. But for someone to solely blame Africans for all the issues that are happening in the continent, that person must be mistaken or it's all wrong. That person must be wrong. For there is just too much Western influence in Africa. Just too much. They influence everything behind the scene. And our African leaders just go along because of their own selfish interests. So the problem in Congo did not just start today. And the problem in Congo isn't just a Congo-only problem. There are a lot of outside influence gaming the system in Congo. And that is why Congo has been a very troubling nation to date. And Congo will keep on being a very troubling nation as long as the leader and the rebels do not realize that they are being manipulated by Westerners. They will keep on falling victim to things like this until they realize that we are Africans, we are Congolese, and it's high time we dialogue with each other. We compromise and then look for a lasting solution to our problem. Because when we keep on fighting each other, we all lose. It is a lose-lose for all of us when we keep on fighting each other. The only way we can win and win bigly is when we realize that unity among us supersede any other thing. That is the only way we are going to win. So to the people of Congo, I say to you guys, please wake up. Please wake up. The infighting has gone on for far too long. And if either one of you thought that fighting each other was gonna make you successful or you're gonna win the war, the battle, then you guys must have realized by now that that isn't a possibility, because you guys have been fighting for 50 years plus, and no individual group has ever won the whole thing. That can only show you that no individual group will ever win the whole thing. You guys would have to negotiate it. So to you guys out there, let me hear your take on these remarks made by the speaker in this video. Is he right? Are all the problems that DR Congo is facing are as a result of Western influence in the country, or they are as a result of bad Congolese leadership? Should we blame the Congolese for all the problems they are facing, or should we blame the Westerners? Who is to be blamed for what Congo is facing? Share that thought and opinion with us, because we enjoy hearing from you. Please don't forget to like this video, share this video, subscribe to our channel, because that helps us a lot, and we shall forever be grateful to you. Thank you very much for doing just that. And like always, see you in the next one.